The automatic doors slid open with a quiet whoosh as David stepped into the gleaming showroom of Premier Auto Gallery. The smell of leather and new car scent filled the air. Rows of luxury vehicles sat under perfect lighting, their paint jobs reflecting the spotless marble floor beneath them. David had just gotten off a red-eye flight from Chicago. His hoodie and jeans were comfortable for travel, but he knew he probably looked a bit rough around the edges. Dark circles shadowed his eyes from the lack of sleep, and he hadn't bothered to shave that morning. Still, he was excited. This was his dealership now, though nobody here knew it yet. He wanted to see the place with fresh eyes before announcing himself as the new owner. Walk around. Get a feel for how things really operated when the boss wasn't watching. His business partner had warned him about some issues at this location, but David believed in seeing things for himself. As he moved toward a silver sports car in the center of the showroom, he noticed a man in a crisp suit watching him from across the room. The man's expression wasn't welcoming. It was suspicious, calculating. David had seen that look before more times than he cared to count. The man walked over with quick, purposeful steps. His name tag read store manager in bold letters. "Can I help you?" the manager asked, but his tone said something else entirely. It said, "You don't belong here." "Just looking around," David replied with a friendly smile. He ran his hand along the smooth hood of the sports car. "Beautiful vehicles you've got here." "This is a luxury dealership," the manager said flatly. "Our cars start at $80,000. David felt a familiar tightness in his chest but kept his voice calm. "I understand. I'm interested in seeing what you have." The manager crossed his arms. "Look, I don't want to waste your time or mine. These vehicles require serious buyers. Maybe you'd be more comfortable at one of our economy locations across town." A young couple browsing nearby glanced over, clearly uncomfortable with what they were hearing. A saleswoman arranging brochures at a nearby desk looked down, pretending not to notice. "I appreciate your concern," David said, his tone still even, "but I'm exactly where I want to be." He moved toward another car, a sleek black sedan with cream leather interior. The manager followed, staying close like a shadow. Too close. "Sir, I'm going to need to ask you what your business is here," the manager pressed. "Are you looking for someone? Because if you're here for a service appointment, that entrance is around back." David stopped and turned to face him directly. "I'm here to look at cars. That's what people do at car dealerships, isn't it? People who can afford them, yes." The manager's voice was getting louder now, drawing more attention. Other staff members were starting to gather at a distance, watching the scene unfold. "I've been in this business for 15 years. I know when someone is serious and when they're just browsing." The way he said browsing made it sound like an accusation. "I'm not causing any trouble," David said quietly. "I'm just a customer walking through your showroom." "A customer?" The manager let out a short laugh. "You walk in here dressed like you just rolled out of bed, no appointment, not even asking about prices or features. Forgive me if I'm skeptical." An older woman who had been examining a luxury SUV stopped and stared, her mouth slightly open. She looked appalled. David felt heat rising in his face but forced himself to stay composed. He'd worked too hard, come too far to let someone like this get under his skin. "I don't need to explain myself to you. I'm not doing anything wrong." "That's exactly what someone casing the place would say," the manager shot back. He pulled out his phone. "I'm calling security. We've had problems with theft in this area and I'm not taking any chances." "Theft?" David's voice finally showed a hint of frustration. "I've been here 5 minutes. I haven't touched anything except a car hood." "You're profiling me." "I'm doing my job," the manager insisted, "and my job is to protect this inventory and ensure the safety of my legitimate customers." The saleswoman who'd been pretending not to watch finally spoke up, her voice hesitant. "Mr. Sullivan, maybe we should just—" "Not now, Rachel," the manager snapped without looking at her. "I've got this handled." David shook his head slowly. He'd seen enough. More than enough, actually. The way the manager treated him. The way the staff seemed afraid to intervene. The uncomfortable silence from the other customers who clearly knew this was wrong but said nothing. "You know what?" David said, his voice tired. "I'll leave. But you might want to remember this conversation." "Is that a threat?" The manager stepped closer, his chest puffed out. "It's advice," David replied. "The way you treat people says everything about who you are. And right now it's not saying anything good." He turned and walked toward the exit, his footsteps echoing in the now silent showroom. Every eye was on him. The automatic doors opened and the afternoon sun hit his face as he stepped outside. David stood in the parking lot for a moment, taking a deep breath. He pulled out his phone and made a call. "Hey, it's me," he said when his business partner answered. "You were right about this place. We've got bigger problems than I thought." He paused, looking back at the dealership through the glass windows. "Much bigger problems, and I think it's time we fixed them." Inside, the manager was already back to business, telling his staff to return to work. He had no idea that the man he'd just humiliated and thrown out was about to change everything. The wheel was about to turn, and karma was coming with a business plan. David sat in his hotel room that evening, staring at the contract papers spread across the desk. Premier Auto Gallery. He'd paid good money for this dealership, seeing potential where others saw a declining business, but now he wondered what he'd really bought into. His phone buzzed. It was his father calling from back home. "Hey, Dad," David answered, leaning back in his chair. "How's the new investment looking?" his father asked. David could hear the smile in his voice. His father had always been his biggest supporter. David let out a long breath. Complicated. Really complicated. Growing up, David had spent every weekend at his father's small auto repair shop. While other kids played video games, he was learning how to change oil, rotate tires, and treat every customer like family. His father had built that business from nothing, one satisfied customer at a time. "Remember what I always told you?" his father said, as if reading his mind. "It doesn't matter if someone drives up in a beat-up Honda or a brand-new Mercedes. You treat them the same. With respect." "I remember," David said softly. He remembered everything. The long hours. The struggle to pay for his business degree while working full-time at the shop. The way his father never turned anyone away, even when they couldn't pay right away. "So what's really bothering you?" his father asked. David told him about the incident at the dealership, about the manager's suspicion, the accusation, the humiliation of being thrown out of his own business. His father was quiet for a moment. "And what are you going to do about it?" "I don't know yet," David admitted. "But I need to understand how deep this goes. One bad manager or something bigger?" "Then you do what you do best, son. You investigate, you learn, and then you fix it." After hanging up, David opened his laptop and started digging. He pulled up employee reviews on job websites. What he found made his stomach turn. "Toxic management," one former employee wrote. "If you're not part of the inner circle, good luck advancing here." Another review was more specific. "Watch the manager ignore minority customers multiple times while rolling out the red carpet for others. When I tried to help those customers, I got written up for stepping on toes." There were dozens more. Stories of favoritism, discrimination, hostile work environment. Several mentioned the manager by name, Sullivan, the same man who'd confronted David. David scrolled through customer reviews next. Mixed ratings, but the negative ones told a familiar story. A Hispanic woman wrote about being steered toward used cars despite asking about new models. A young black couple described being followed around the showroom like criminals. An Asian businessman mentioned being asked repeatedly if he understood English. This wasn't just about one bad day. This was a pattern, a culture. His phone rang again. Unknown number. "Hello? Mr. Chen?" a woman's voice asked hesitantly. "I hope you don't mind me calling. I'm Rachel. I work at Premier Auto Gallery. I got your number from the acquisition paperwork in the office." David sat up straighter. Rachel, the saleswoman who tried to speak up. "I remember you," he said. "You tried to say something today." "I should have said more." Her voice was filled with regret. "I should have done more. But I need this job. I have 2 kids and Sullivan makes life hell for anyone who challenges him." "Tell me what's been going on," David said gently. The floodgates opened. Rachel had been working there for 3 years, watching Sullivan run the place like his personal kingdom. He played favorites with certain salespeople while sabotaging others. He made inappropriate comments about female employees. And the racial profiling David experienced? That was standard procedure. "There's a young guy here, Kevin," Rachel continued. "He's been keeping records, screenshots of text messages, notes about incidents. He's been too afraid to do anything with them, but I think he'd talk to you." "Can you set up a meeting?" David asked. "I'll try. But Mr. Chen, you need to understand something. The previous owner knew about Sullivan's behavior. There were complaints, but Sullivan brings in sales numbers, so everything got swept under the rug. The owner cared more about short-term profit than doing the right thing. David pinched the bridge of his nose. That's exactly why the business was failing. You can't build something sustainable on a rotten foundation. Some of us have been hoping someone would come in and clean house. Rachel said quietly, I just never thought it would happen like this. Over the next few days, David met quietly with current and former employees. Kevin, the young salesman Rachel mentioned, brought a folder full of documentation. Text messages where Sullivan used racial slurs when talking about customers. Emails showing how he assigned the best leads to his favorite salespeople, while giving scraps to everyone else. Photos of the luxury parking spots reserved for preferred staff members, which somehow were all white men. David also tracked down former employees who'd quit. A talented saleswoman named Patricia told him she'd left after Sullivan promoted a less qualified male colleague over her, then suggested she'd be better suited for receptionist work. I was the top seller 2 years running, Patricia said, her voice bitter. But according to Sullivan, I didn't have the right image for luxury sales. Another former employee, Tom, had quit after being pressured to ignore minority customers. He told me those people were tire kickers who'd waste my time. When I refused and made a huge sale to an Indian family, he took half my commission, said I needed to learn to pick my battles. The financial records told another story. Customer retention was terrible. People bought one car and never came back. The dealership's reputation in the community was declining steadily. Online ratings had dropped from 4 stars to 2.5 over the past 3 years. David found complaints that had been filed with corporate headquarters before he bought the place. All dismissed or ignored. Sullivan had friends in high places, apparently, or the previous owner just didn't care enough to act. But David cared. He cared deeply. Because this wasn't just business to him. It was personal. It was about the values his father had taught him. It was about the kind of world he wanted to help create. He made a list of everything he'd learned. The discrimination, the toxic culture, the retaliation against good employees who tried to do the right thing, the lost revenue from customers who'd never return. Sullivan thought he was untouchable. He'd gotten away with this behavior for years, protected by an owner who valued profit over people. But that owner was gone now, and David was nothing like him. He picked up his phone and sent an email to the entire staff. Short and simple. Team meeting this Friday at 9 a.m. The new owner will be introducing himself and discussing the future of Premier Auto Gallery. Attendance is mandatory. David smiled slightly as he hit send. Sullivan would be there, expecting to impress some wealthy businessman he'd never met. He had no idea what was coming. No idea at all. Friday morning couldn't come fast enough for David, but he forced himself to be patient. There was still work to do, still more to uncover. He spent Wednesday morning at a coffee shop 2 blocks from the dealership, meeting with someone he'd tracked down through online reviews. Her name was Linda, and she'd been a customer at Premier Auto Gallery 5 years ago. Once, I'll never forget it, Linda said, stirring her latte slowly. My husband had just passed away. I needed a reliable car, something safe. I'd saved up $30,000. David listened carefully as she continued. The moment I walked in, I felt invisible. I'm not exaggerating. Salespeople walked right past me. I stood there for 20 minutes before anyone acknowledged me. Linda shook her head. Finally, Sullivan came over, asked if I was there to pick up a car for my employer. What did you say? David asked. I told him I was there to buy a car for myself. He actually looked surprised. Then he walked me straight to the used section in the back corner. Kept showing me cars that were way below my budget. When I asked about the new models in the showroom, he said those might be outside my comfort zone. Linda pulled out her phone and showed David a photo. It was her, standing next to a beautiful new sedan. Different dealership logo in the background. I took my money across town. The salesman there treated me like a person. Asked about my needs, my budget, what features mattered to me. I bought a $40,000 car that day. Could have been Sullivan's sale. She looked directly at David. When I saw your email asking to talk, I knew something was finally happening. Please tell me you're going to do something about that place. I am, David promised. I definitely am. That afternoon, David met Kevin in a park near the dealership. The young salesman looked nervous, constantly glancing around like someone might be watching. I've been documenting everything for 8 months, Kevin said, handing David a USB drive. Every incident I witnessed or experienced personally. I kept thinking someone would eventually care enough to look into it. David plugged the drive into his laptop right there on the bench. Video files, audio recordings, screenshots. Kevin had been thorough. One video showed Sullivan talking to his inner circle of salespeople in his office. The door was cracked open and Kevin had recorded from the hallway. "Listen, I don't care what corporate says about equal opportunity." Sullivan's voice came through clearly. "When you see certain types walk in, you let me handle it. Don't waste your time on people who are just here to look around and dream. Focus on real buyers." "How do we know who's a real buyer?" one of the salespeople asked. Sullivan laughed. "You'll know. Trust me, you'll know." David felt sick watching it. The implications were crystal clear, even if Sullivan never said the words out loud. Another file showed email exchanges between Sullivan and the previous owner. Sullivan complaining about a discrimination complaint from a customer. The owner's response: "Handle it quietly. Offer them a discount on service or something. Just make it go away." "This is incredible documentation," David told Kevin. "Why didn't you take this to someone before?" Kevin looked down at his hands. "I tried once. Called the corporate ethics hotline. 2 days later, Sullivan pulled me into his office. Somehow he knew. Told me if I valued my career, I'd learn to be a team player. I've got student loans, rent. I couldn't afford to lose this job." "You won't lose your job," David said firmly. "Not for doing the right thing. Not anymore." Thursday brought another revelation. David had requested the full customer database from the dealership's system administrator, claiming he wanted to understand buying patterns. What he found was damning. He ran the numbers himself, cross-referencing sales data with customer information. The pattern was undeniable. Minority customers who managed to make purchases paid an average of 8% more than white customers for the same vehicles. They received fewer upgrade offers, less favorable financing terms, and almost never got the premium service packages offered to others. The repeat customer rate told an even clearer story. White customers returned to the dealership for their next purchase 43% of the time. For everyone else, 11%. David created charts and graphs making the discrimination visible in cold, hard data. This wasn't about feelings or perceptions. This was mathematical proof of systematic unfair treatment. He also discovered something interesting in the personnel files. 5 excellent salespeople had quit in the past 18 months, all of them minorities or women. Their exit interviews, which Sullivan had conducted himself, blamed cultural fit or not meeting performance standards. But David dug deeper and found their actual sales numbers. Every single one of them had been performing above average. 2 were in the top 10%. They hadn't failed. They'd been pushed out. He tracked down one of them, a woman named Rita, who now worked at a competing dealership. "I outsold most of Sullivan's guys by 20%, Rita told him over the phone. "But I was never invited to the important meetings. Never got the premium leads. When I complained, Sullivan started writing me up for tiny things. Dress code violations, being 2 minutes late. Eventually I got the message and left." "How are you doing now?" David asked. Rita laughed. "I'm the top seller at my current dealership. 3rd month in a row. Turns out I'm pretty good at this when someone isn't actively sabotaging me." By Thursday evening, David had built an airtight case. Not just about his own experience, though that was the catalyst. This was about years of discrimination, lost revenue, destroyed careers, and a toxic culture that poisoned everything it touched. He sat in his hotel room, organizing everything into a presentation: photos, videos, audio recordings, statistical analysis, testimonials from employees and customers, financial data showing exactly how much Sullivan's behavior had cost the business. Some people might wonder why he didn't just fire Sullivan immediately and move on, but David knew that wouldn't fix the real problem. The staff needed to understand how deep this went. They needed to see the evidence. Some of them had been complicit, looking the other way to protect their own positions. They needed to confront what they'd allowed to happen, and Sullivan needed to face the consequences of his actions in front of everyone. Not quietly, not swept under the rug like before. David's phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "Sullivan is preparing a huge presentation for tomorrow. He wants to impress the new owner. Everyone's talking about what the new boss will be like." David smiled and typed back, "I think they're in for a surprise." He looked at his reflection in the hotel mirror. Tomorrow he'd wear his best suit. Tomorrow he'd walk into that dealership as the owner, not as someone to be dismissed and thrown out. Tomorrow, everything would change. He pulled up the email he'd drafted, the one that would go out to the entire staff after the meeting. It outlined new policies, new standards, and a new vision for what Premier Auto Gallery would become. But first, they needed to understand what it had been and why that could never happen again. David saved the presentation one final time and closed his laptop. Justice was coming to Premier Auto Gallery, and it was bringing receipts. Friday morning arrived with clear blue skies. David pulled into the Premier Auto Gallery parking lot at 8:45, 15 minutes before the meeting. He sat in his car for a moment, adjusting his tie in the rearview mirror. The navy suit fit perfectly. His shoes were polished. He looked every bit the successful businessman he was. Through the showroom windows, he could see staff members gathering in the conference room. Sullivan stood at the front, pointing at something on a screen, clearly rehearsing his presentation. David allowed himself a small smile. At exactly 9 o'clock, David walked through those same automatic doors he'd been escorted out of just days earlier. This time, the receptionist greeted him warmly. "Good morning. Are you here for the staff meeting?" "I am," David said pleasantly. "I'm the new owner." The receptionist's eyes went wide. "Oh, Mr. Chen." "Of course, right this way." Heads turned as David walked through the showroom toward the conference room. Some staff members looked confused. Others, like Rachel and Kevin, were fighting back smiles. They knew what was coming. David entered the conference room and the chatter immediately died down. Sullivan was mid-sentence in his practice run, his back to the door. "And that's why our sales numbers prove that my management strategy is exactly what this dealership needs to." Sullivan turned around and froze. The color drained from his face like someone had pulled a plug. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. No words came out. "Please don't let me interrupt," David said calmly, walking to the front of the room. "I'm David Chen, the new owner." "I believe you were expecting me." The room was silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Sullivan's carefully prepared presentation was still on the screen behind him, showing graphs about sales growth and customer satisfaction. The irony wasn't lost on David. "Mr. Chen," Sullivan finally managed, his voice cracking slightly. He tried to laugh, but it came out wrong, nervous. I didn't realize. When we met the other day, I didn't know that I was the owner." David finished for him. "No, I don't suppose you did. You were too busy making assumptions based on how I was dressed. Too busy deciding I didn't belong here." Sullivan's eyes darted around the room, looking for support. His inner circle of salespeople suddenly found the floor very interesting. "Look, that was a misunderstanding," Sullivan said, attempting to recover. "I was just doing my job. We've had security concerns and I was protecting the inventory. I'm sure you understand." "I understand perfectly," David interrupted, his voice still calm but carrying weight. "I understand that you've created a culture of discrimination here. I understand that you profile customers based on their appearance. And I understand that this has been going on for years." Sullivan tried to object, but David held up a hand. "Everyone, please sit down. What I'm about to share concerns all of you." The staff members took their seats slowly, the tension in the room thick enough to cut. David connected his laptop to the projector, and Sullivan's presentation disappeared, replaced by David's first slide. It was a photo of him from earlier that week. Standing in the showroom, the timestamp showed it was moments before Sullivan had confronted him. "This is me 4 days ago, a paying customer walking into this dealership. Or trying to." David advanced to the next slide. Here's what happened next. He didn't have video of the incident, but he'd recreated a timeline with photos and his written account. He read portions aloud, his voice steady. "I was questioned about whether I could afford to be here, followed around, accused of casing the place, and ultimately thrown out." He paused. "For the crime of being a black man in a hoodie who wanted to look at cars." Some staff members shifted uncomfortably. Others looked genuinely shocked. Sullivan stood frozen, his face now red instead of pale. "But here's the thing," David continued. "This wasn't about one bad day. This is a pattern." Click. The next slide showed customer reviews. David had highlighted specific quotes about discrimination and poor treatment. Click. Employee testimonials from people who'd quit or been pushed out. Click. The Video Kevin had recorded of Sullivan telling his team to avoid certain types of customers. Sullivan's face went from red to purple. That's out of context. You can't just— I can, David said firmly, because I own this dealership now and I have every right to know how it's been run. Or should I say, how it's been run into the ground. He showed the financial data next. The declining customer retention, the lost revenue, the turnover rate among talented employees. This isn't just morally wrong, David explained. It's terrible business. You've cost this company millions of dollars in potential revenue because you couldn't see past your own prejudices. Rachel raised her hand tentatively. David nodded at her. I just want to say, she began, her voice shaking slightly. I've watched this happen for 3 years. I've seen good people driven away. I've seen customers treated horribly. And I'm ashamed I didn't speak up louder. She looked directly at David. I'm sorry for not saying more when you were here. Thank you, Rachel, David said sincerely. And you're going to get your chance to help fix this. Kevin spoke up next. I documented everything because I hoped someone would eventually care. I just never thought— He trailed off, emotion in his voice. Sullivan finally found his voice again. This is ridiculous. You can't come in here and destroy my reputation based on cherry-picked examples. I've given 15 years to this company. 15 years of the wrong kind of leadership, David said. And I'm not cherry-picking. I'm showing a systematic pattern of discrimination and poor management. He clicked to another slide. It showed exit interviews from the 5 high-performing employees who'd quit. Then their actual sales numbers, proving they'd been top performers. You drove out talent because it didn't fit your narrow view of what a successful salesperson looks like, David said. You created an environment where people succeeded based on who they knew, not what they could do. A salesman named Tony, one of Sullivan's favorites, spoke up defensively. Sullivan taught me everything I know. He's not a bad guy. He's just old school. Old school is another way of saying outdated and discriminatory, David replied. And being a good mentor to some people doesn't excuse being terrible to others. The door opened and the receptionist peeked in nervously. I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here who insisted on coming up. An elderly woman walked in. David recognized her immediately, the customer who'd watched his confrontation with Sullivan. Mrs. Patterson, David said warmly. Thank you for coming. She nodded at him, then turned to address the room. I've been a customer here for 20 years. Bought 6 cars from this dealership, but after what I witnessed last week, I'll never buy another. That young man, she pointed at Sullivan, treated Mr. Chen like a criminal for simply existing in this space. It was disgraceful. Sullivan tried to speak, but Mrs. Patterson wasn't finished. And it made me think about other things I'd seen over the years, things I'd overlooked or excused. No more. She looked at David. I hope you can turn this place around, Mr. Chen. It needs it desperately. After she left, David faced Sullivan one final time. This ends now, he said simply. You're terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you out after we're done here. Sullivan sputtered, threatened lawsuits, claimed unfair treatment. But his words rang hollow in the face of all the evidence. David turned to the rest of the staff. Some of you enabled this culture. Some of you stayed silent. I understand fear. I understand needing a paycheck. But moving forward, none of that is an excuse. We're going to rebuild this place from the ground up, and anyone who can't commit to treating every single person with respect and dignity should leave now with Sullivan. 3 people stood up and walked out, Sullivan's closest allies. David watched them go without comment. For everyone else, David continued, welcome to the new Premier Auto Gallery. The conference room felt different after Sullivan left. Lighter somehow, like a heavy blanket had been lifted. David looked at the remaining staff members, seeing a mix of relief, uncertainty, and hope in their faces. I know change is scary. David began. Some of you are probably worried about your jobs. Others might be thinking this is just talk, that nothing will really change. I'm here to prove you wrong. He pulled up a new presentation. Not accusations this time, but a vision. Rachel, David said, turning to her. You tried to speak up when I was being mistreated. You've been documenting problems and trying to help colleagues who were struggling. Effective immediately, you're the interim general manager. Rachel's hand flew to her mouth. Tears welled up in her eyes. I don't know what to say. Say you'll help me rebuild this place the right way, David replied with a warm smile. Yes, she said firmly, wiping her eyes. Absolutely yes. Over the next hour, David outlined his plan. Mandatory training on unconscious bias and inclusive customer service. A complete revision of the commission structure to eliminate discrimination in lead distribution. An anonymous reporting system for concerns or complaints. And most importantly, a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination of any kind. I'm also bringing in a team of HR consultants, David explained. They'll be conducting interviews with each of you individually. This isn't a witch hunt. It's a chance to understand what's been happening and how we fix it. Be honest with them. There won't be retaliation for telling the truth. Kevin raised his hand. What about the people who left because of Sullivan? The good salespeople who got pushed out? I'm personally reaching out to every one of them, David said, offering them their jobs back with a formal apology and a signing bonus. Whether they come back is up to them, but they deserve to know things are different now. The meeting ended with cautious optimism. As people filed out, several approached David privately to thank him or share their own stories. One older salesman admitted he'd been uncomfortable with Sullivan's methods but didn't know how to speak up without risking his retirement. You don't have to worry about that anymore, David assured him. Doing the right thing will be rewarded here, not punished. The first week was intense. David spent 12-hour days at the dealership, observing operations, talking to staff, and beginning the culture change. The HR consultants conducted their interviews, uncovering even more stories of discrimination and favoritism that had been buried. Rachel proved to be exactly the leader the team needed. She was firm but fair, approachable but professional. Within days, the atmosphere in the dealership began to shift. People smiled more. Conversations were friendlier. The tension that had hung over the place started to dissolve. David kept his promise about reaching out to former employees. He called Rita first, the top-performing saleswoman who'd been driven out. I want to apologize on behalf of Premier Auto Gallery, David said. What happened to you was wrong. I'd like to offer you your position back, along with a $20,000 signing bonus and a guarantee that you'll receive fair treatment. Rita was quiet for a moment. I appreciate that, Mr. Chen, I really do, but I'm happy where I am now. My current dealership values me. I understand completely, David said. But if you ever change your mind, the door is open. Not everyone said no. 2 of the 5 former employees accepted his offer and returned. One of them, Patricia, the woman who'd been told she didn't have the right image for luxury sales, became one of Rachel's assistant managers. I never thought I'd walk back through those doors, Patricia told David on her first day back. But this feels different. It feels like a place where I can actually build a career. The changes weren't just internal. David had new signs made for the showroom. Everyone welcome here. No exceptions. He implemented a policy where every customer who walked through the door was greeted within 60 seconds regardless of how they looked or what they drove. The proof came about 3 weeks in. A young couple walked into the showroom, both wearing work uniforms from a nearby factory. Under Sullivan's regime, they would have been ignored or dismissed. Instead, a salesman named Alex approached them immediately. David watched from his office as Alex spent 2 hours with them, patiently explaining options, finding financing that worked for their budget, and treating them with genuine respect. They left with a certified pre-owned sedan and huge smiles on their faces. Alex came to David's office afterward, excited. They were first-time car buyers. They'd been to 3 other dealerships this week and felt ignored at all of them. They said this was the first place that treated them like real customers. That's exactly what we're building here, David said, shaking his hand. Well done. The financial results took longer to materialize, but they came. The online reviews slowly improved as word spread about the changes. Former customers started coming back, curious if the rumors were true. Mrs. Patterson returned and bought a new luxury SUV, telling everyone she knew about the transformation. David made a point of visiting the dealership regularly, sometimes dressed casually, sometimes in a suit. He wanted to see if the culture change was real or just performance for the boss. Every time, he was treated with the same respect as any other customer. That's when he knew they'd really shifted things. 3 months after Sullivan's firing, David stood in the showroom early one morning, before the staff arrived. He thought about his father's auto shop, about the values he'd learned there. Treat everyone with dignity. Success comes from doing right by people, not cutting corners. His phone buzzed. It was Rachel. Morning, boss. Just wanted to let you know we had our best month in 3 years. Customer satisfaction scores are up 40%, and we just got contacted by a local business magazine wanting to feature us as an example of positive workplace transformation. David smiled. That's great news, but you know what I'm most proud of? What's that? Last week, Kevin told me he actually looks forward to coming to work now. That's the real measure of success. Rachel laughed. You're right. Same here, honestly. After hanging up, David walked to the window overlooking the parking lot. The sun was rising, casting golden light across the rows of vehicles. Each one represented a potential customer, a person with hopes and dreams, and the right to be treated with respect. He thought about that day when Sullivan had thrown him out, how angry and humiliated he'd felt, but also how clearly he'd seen what needed to change. Sometimes the worst moments reveal the most important truths. David pulled out his phone and called his father. Hey, Dad, just wanted to say thank you. For what, son? For teaching me that how you treat people matters more than anything else. You were right. You've always been right. His father chuckled warmly. Took you long enough to admit it, so the dealership is working out? It's becoming something I'm proud of, David said, not because of the sales numbers or the profit margins, because it's a place where everyone gets treated fairly, where people judge you by your character, not your appearance. That's my boy, his father said, pride evident in his voice. That's exactly what I taught you. As staff members started arriving for the day, David greeted each one by name. The dealership was thriving, but more importantly, it was becoming what it should have been all along, a place where everyone belonged, where respect wasn't conditional, where the content of your character mattered more than the color of your skin or the clothes on your back. Sullivan had tried to judge David in 60 seconds, making assumptions based on appearance alone. He'd been spectacularly wrong. And in being wrong, he'd lost everything, while David had gained an opportunity to create something meaningful. The wheel had turned, justice had been served, and Premier Auto Gallery was finally living up to its potential, not in spite of treating everyone equally, but because of it. David walked onto the showroom floor, ready for another day of building something that mattered. One respectful interaction at a time,